My name is Gina McCarthy, and I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Natural Resources Defense Council, one of the premier environmental advocacy organizations in the country. And I am also a former administrator at the United States Environmental Protection Agency. I've spent some time at the Harvard School of Public Health. None of us are at our place of work, and instead we're sitting at our homes, taping much of this. And I spend a lot of my days thinking that these earphones are going to make me connected in some way permanently to my computer, because that seems to be where I sit all day long, permanently connected. And I spend a lot of my free time trying to enjoy the togetherness with my husband, which I've found can at times be heavily overrated. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to talk with you today. And I'd like to just spend a few minutes and keep this as focused as humanly possible on the intersection between climate and water and food, because it's time that we get back to basics. A lot of people are active and engaged in issues of climate change, as they should be. Most of them are focused on movements towards clean energy, which is great. They're focused on the transportation sector. They're focused on buildings and how they can be efficient. They're focused on making sure that heat islands are addressed in our cities by different ways of living and engaging in different treescapes and playgrounds. All those things are wonderful. But the basics that I'd like to return to are actually how climate change impacts food and water, because there is not any two basic necessities that are more important to human beings than food and water. And climate change exacerbates the problems we are having with both. So the basic things we need to talk about is the fact that now we have water, we have either too little or we have too much. And it's also changing the landscape of where that too much and too little is, and what it means for the soils and the processes we use to actually create the food that goes on everybody's table that is necessary for life. So we're looking at going back to basics. Our food systems have to keep up with the population. We do not have the systems that have that in place. Unfortunately, agriculture is now the #1 killer of our forests and our biodiversity, because as we seek to grow more food, we are tearing down the very natural resources that allow the earth to survive and people to survive in it. Agriculture is now turning to industrial farming, which we know uses fertilizers and pesticides, which are fossil fuel based, which end up adding contaminants in our drinking water supplies, which ends up degrading soil that goes into places like the Great Lakes, actually harming the Great Lakes themselves, but also contaminating the water downstream with harmful algal blooms that can stretch up to 600 miles long, that have shut down the city of Toledo's drinking water supply. But it's not just the Great Lakes that are experiencing harmful algal blooms and challenges with nitrates. It's all over the country. And we see it in the Mississippi. We see small communities that are struggling with their water supplies because they're finding high levels of nitrates, which are a danger to their health, particularly the health of young kids. We need to figure out how to keep soil in its place, keep nutrients in that soil, in the farmland, not in our rivers and streams and in our drinking water supplies. We have flooding now in the Mississippi and in the Missouri River that is essentially heartbreaking. It's looking at relying on old levees and old dams to control what is essentially the power of water, which is never going to be controlled by those old levees. And what happens is you're losing family farms that have been in families for generations, and you simply have to walk away from them. We have our oceans that are getting hotter, our coral reefs that are deteriorating. We have wetlands that are no longer available to buffer us against storms. We are overfishing in certain areas. The challenge that we have with food and water are intimately connected with one another, And all of those challenges are either exacerbated by climate change or in some way made difficult in different places. We're seeing dead zones where we do not have fish available. It is in oceans everywhere where there's a challenge. Fisheries are being overstocked, but coral reefs are dwindling. And in those dead zones, we are not seeing an ability for life to thrive that's going to allow us to have the fish supplies that we have relied on, not just to eat, but for all of the ancillary businesses that rely on those fisheries to survive. This is a part of our culture, our heritage. We need to work together. Farmers need to farm and keep their soil and their nutrients in that soil so that they can be productive forever. And communities need to rely on those jobs and the beautiful natural resources so they can live healthy, productive lives. We need to recognize that climate change is posing problems, but that we're smarter than climate change. We can fix it. The challenge is that we have to work together to do that. Not just the coasts, but the middle of this country has everything to lose, and what they lose, the coast loses as well, which is our ability to have healthy, stable food supplies, clean water to drink, and a future we're proud to leave to our children. You know, the United States has some of the most productive and fertile farmland in the world. We need to start making sure that the farmers who work those farms are part of the climate discussion, that they get engaged, that we work those farms in a way that will keep them fertile and keep the surrounding water clean. We have Colorado worrying about drinking water supplies, worrying about the water that's being diverted to California. We have Californians in the cities worried about whether they're going to have their water supplies, while the farmers down below that feed so much of us with the food we need to eat won't have the water to be able to utilize for those farmlands. We are fighting a battle here that we cannot afford to lose. And farmers need to be in that battle and fighting with us, because right now they are so unsettled in their ability to be able to do their jobs and put food on their own table that the suicide rate among farmers is higher than it has ever been. We need to invest now in food and water systems that connect these basic dots between climate change, what's happening in our food systems, and what's happening in drinking water supplies. We have to connect with those coastal states with the rest of the country, because we have an opportunity now to talk about the bread basket, to talk about what's happening in the Midwest, and have everybody act together, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, because there is nothing political about needing food to eat or clean water to drink. So maybe, just maybe, we can turn some attention to those areas where the investment is limited, where the excitement is not there, where the damage is always what we talk about, never the kind of agricultural practices using cover crops and regenerative farming, reusing our food waste. Those are the exciting things that can bring this country together. And Lord knows that climate change is not a planetary problem, it's a people problem. And our challenge is to bring them together. That's going back to basics, the way we need to go, that will improve all of our lives and give us an ability to engage people across the United States in keeping their families safe, keeping food on their table, getting them water to drink. Today is a very scary time. You know, and my heart goes out to everybody that's been impacted by COVID-19. But it's also a time when we have to reinvest in our economy. We have to put people back to work. We have to all work together to make sure that each one of us can survive and live a healthy life. And what we're seeing today is that trillions of dollars are being spent to actually rebuild the economy, to put people back to work, to make sure we can have food on our table. What if we actually looked at what's best for the future when we do that? What if we invest in agriculture the way that we should be investing it? Reward our farmers for doing the kind of agriculture that will keep our natural resources safe and productive and plentiful, and our drinking water supplies clean, and the kind of nutritious food that they need to grow to keep us healthy. We have to look at who's being damaged by these types of pandemics, because that's who climate change is also hurting. It is hurting communities of color and people in poverty who cannot help themselves. We have to work together to make sure that those communities are not left behind, that the rural communities that have been losing jobs get a boost in the arm, not just a return to what has just recently happened, which is too few jobs for too many people. This is an opportunity to reinvest in America, but not just America, but the future of America. We have resources that can help support farmers to make the transition to regenerative agriculture, that can support cover crops, that can make sure that farmers are investing in the kind of agricultural practices that will not only provide a more certain future for them at a time when it's so unstable for our agriculture, but at a time when it'll bring us all together as a country. Not just the coastlines talking about climate and coastal flooding, but the entire country realizing that this is a moment in time when we now realize just how vulnerable we are. We know climate change is part of it, and we know if we work together, we can have better, nutritious food, we can have cleaner water, we can have the kind of air that people need to breathe, and we can be better protected in the future by having the systems in place that we can rely on to protect us from the changes that we're now having to face. Look, this isn't about a return to the past. This isn't about what things used to be. This is about recognizing that we have two basic needs in life, and it's food and water. And if we do not work together to protect that and to look at a future where that remains plentiful, where we work together to have a life that we want to live that's better than the one we have today, then we will have missed one of the biggest opportunities of our lives. But it's going to take investment, it's going to take ingenuity, and it's going to take a whole lot more people focused on this issue than has ever been focused before. Thank you.